No. Thank you, that's kind of you. Commitment is the foundation of great accomplishments. Without commitment, Amelia Earhart wouldn't have become the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Without commitment, we wouldn't be able to enjoy all of the Olympic athletes from all over the world coming together every 2 years, showing us both their physical and mental stamina at the highest level. And without commitment, a couple, the Fishers from James City, North Carolina, wouldn't have set the Guinness World Record for marriage. 86 years. I've been married 8, so I mean, that's like, oh man, fabulous, incredible lifetime of family, a lifetime of love. And I think we all intuitively understand this, right? To achieve greatness in the areas that are important to us requires that we deeply invest ourselves and commit. And as we do that, it shapes a life for us. What we often overlook, though, are the ways in which all of our commitments, the grand ones, but also the smaller ones that we make, shape our lives. I'm going to start with a very small commitment that you make every day. If you're here, you made this commitment this morning. The simple commitment to just simply get out of bed. Can sometimes feel like a big commitment, right? You know, those mornings where you don't really feel like getting out of bed, but you know if you're going to accomplish anything that day, you've got to at least start with getting out of bed. You can't brush your teeth, take a shower, let alone get to work, deal with your kids, anything without that very first commitment. So congratulate yourself on that commitment that you did today, right? So yeah, so we understand that there are commitments where, you know, I don't have to think that much about some of these commitments. I do them pretty automatically. But there are some commitments in our lives that really do require a lot of thought and reflection. And I'm thinking particularly about our lives at work and in love. I want to share with you a very surprising, really startling Gallup poll about how engaged people are with their jobs. According to this Gallup poll, only 13% of those surveyed classified themselves as being psychologically committed to their job, which means they go, they're excited to be there, they're putting everything they have into their work. On the other side, we have 24% who really just hate their jobs, they don't want to be there, and in fact are actively working against the goals of the organization. I hope you don't work with one of these people. If you do, I'm sure you know that you do. So those are interesting statistics alone. But what I find particularly fascinating is actually the majority of folks. The 2/3 who say that they are just not engaged. So they're committed enough to go to work day in and day out. So they get there and they're going through the motions. And that's really what it is. That's really how they described it, is I'm just going through the motions. But that's the interesting thing, is that even if you are just committed enough to get there and go through the motions, because you spend so much time there, that's still shaping your life in many ways. Now, there can't be anybody who's just going through the motions in relationships, right? Nobody's just walking the walk, talking that, okay. Well, we know the divorce statistics. I don't need to reiterate those. But I think there's also a very interesting trend in terms of cohabitation. What a lot of people don't realize is that there are a lot of people cohabitating today, and they do so for some interesting reasons that I think shows us something about commitment. The most important thing, and first of all, I should say I don't have anything against cohabitation personally, but what the data says is that people who cohabitate before they marry are statistically significantly more likely to later divorce. And that's a very interesting finding that surprises a lot of people, and it surprised researchers too, and so they all sort of like, how do we figure out what this is? What's going on here? Why is this occurring? And the answer seems to lie, at least somewhat, in why people decide to move in together without marrying in the first place. When researchers ask, there's 2 big reasons that people share. One is, well, it was just kind of easy, you know? Like, my toothbrush was there, so why shouldn't I be? You know? Like, you know, my stuff was there anyway, or the rent was cheaper, or it just seemed like, you know, we just kind of did it, right? The second reason is that some people consider it a test, right? So maybe I'm not sure how committed I am long-term to this relationship, so we'll try it out, we'll see how it goes. The issue seems to be, though, is that even if couples don't pass the test and it turns out they're not super well matched for each other, they often end up married anyway. And the issue seems to be that what researchers call it is sliding versus deciding. Does that make sense? So sometimes we commit because we've really made a conscious decision to do so in marriage and otherwise. And sometimes we do it because we were investing more and more in something and we started cutting off other choices, and all of a sudden we found ourselves committed to something that maybe wasn't so right, and then we began to question it. So whether in relationships or in romantic or at work, and there's all kinds of areas of our lives that we can think about this. And how does commitment shape our lives, whether we're really thoughtful about it or whether we do it unconsciously. Ultimately, we do get to choose, right? All kinds of commitments shape our lives, the constructive ones and the destructive ones. The ones that, we think about, the ones that we don't think about, the large and small, all of them shape our lives in a different way. But ultimately, the power is we get to make that choice. If we decide to stop and look at our lives and say, hey, what am I committed to? What am I really deeply committed to? I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got interested in this topic. I don't know if I was sliding or deciding, to be honest. I'm a university professor, and I got the opportunity to take a sabbatical. And in my sabbatical, I decided to write a proposal for a book about commitment. And I was really invested in writing the proposal, and I did it so well that I got an instant offer. Unfortunately, I'd put in the proposal that I would have the book ready for them in 9 months. And that included all the research that I hadn't yet read and all the interviews I hadn't yet conducted. And so I was at a choice point, like we often find ourselves at a choice point where I say, okay, am I going to commit to this? Am I going to sign this contract? And then I really got to get it done, right? Or am I going to keep doing, my life is nice. I'm a college professor. I've been married 8 years. I have a good life. I don't have to have this, but those are those moments where you have to really say, what do I really want? What do I really want to commit to? And when I did make that commitment, I found that several things happened. One, it shaped my life. For 9 months, it shaped my life. It was kind of like, being pregnant shapes your life. You got 9 months, you're going to do this thing, right? And every day was shaped. My husband's life was shaped. My coworker's life was shaped. My friend's life was shaped. It wasn't even just my life that was shaped by the commitment. But my life has been shaped since then, too. By making that commitment, I have an opportunity to be here and talking with you. The other thing I learned is that you really kind of have to have a plan to do commitment well, right? We like to think, I think, that you just say, I'm going to be committed, and then you are. Like, how many people say that, right? Like, oh, yeah, I'm committed, right? But commitment isn't just a word. It's really a process. How do you actually create commitment within yourself? How do you actually develop it? Sometimes that requires a plan. Part of that plan, I found, was needing to let go of other commitments. And that can be really challenging, to let go of other important commitments, to sort of prioritize your commitments. That's a tough thing, isn't it? To figure that out. And so, I let my husband go. No, I'm just kidding. Just joking. He was great. He really was my sanity. But I did, for example, and I gave up a lot of things during that time, but one thing was I'd been on a tennis team for 8 years, and I gave that up. So, and that was a process to let go of a commitment, too. Do you ever find that? Like you said, you quit your job. You don't just say, I quit. You'd like to, right, in one way. But in another way, it really is a process. And sometimes it requires, going through it, planning it out, figuring it out. So at this point, you're probably wondering, okay, well, what is commitment then? Is it the same thing as an obligation? Is it the same thing as a promise? Here's the definition that I use from social psychology. Commitment is the experience of being psychologically attached to something and intending to continue. That's what shapes our lives. Being psychologically attached. Not an obligation, not like, sure, I'm committed, not even a promise. It's, are we really psychologically attached? And this is a matter of degrees. A lot of people also think of commitment as an on-off kind of thing. You're either committed or you're not. How many times have we heard that, right? But it is a matter of degrees. I can be very highly committed. I can have a low level of commitment, or I can have something in between, like those, 2/3 of the workers that are saying, I'm going, but I'm not really going, with my full self. And I would say that any of those levels of commitment shapes our life. So it's just a question of, thinking through, okay, what am I really committed to? How much? Is it enough? Because commitment can vary, the question is there a way that we can increase commitment within ourselves to the things that matter most and will shape our lives in positive ways? And then are there also ways that we can learn to let go of the commitments that are holding us back, or in some cases are really quite hurtful for us? And I think the answer is yes. And I come to this answer from a significant amount of research, really a lot of research over years and years by a lot of really smart people who have found that there are some factors that predict how committed we'll be. There are 4 factors in particular that when we consider them together have a highly predictive value in terms of how committed you'll be to your job, to your relationship, to your goals, to your health practices, to a sports team. Do you ever wonder, like, why am I more committed, not committed here? Why did the commitment level change? This explains it, and I think we can use this in a way that we can empower ourselves. If commitment's going to shape our lives, how could I have a role in that and not just let commitment happen to me? So I'm going to talk about the first 2 factors. Okay, so these are the 4 factors that predict commitment according to social science research. These are my terms. These terms have gone by, these words, there have been different words over the years, but these are the words I like to use. The first 2 words are treasures and troubles. And the reason I put these 2 together is we really have to consider these 2 together. It's kind of like a cost-benefit analysis. It's hard to just think about one without thinking about the other, right? So and you can do this right now. You can think about a commitment in your life. What do you treasure about it, right? What are the benefits? What do you value about it? What kind of meaning does it bring to you? Maybe joy, right? And then you sort of counterbalance that with, okay, how troubling is it? What are the problems? What are the difficulties? What are the things I have to kind of put up with? And troubles vary a lot too, right? So some troubles are like, it's a little difficult, but it's worth it because I'm going for the gold medal, right? Other troubles are really significant, and you stop and you say, I don't know if I want to continue this. Because satisfaction is a major predictor of commitment. It isn't the only thing. It's not just like if you're satisfied, you stay. If you're not satisfied, you go. Thankfully, it's not quite that simple. But satisfaction is a huge predictor of commitment. So I want to tell you about a friend of mine, Melinda O'Malley Keckler. She was the news anchor for Channel 2 News in my city for many years. And she loved the job. It was her dream job. Absolutely fabulous. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Treasures up the wazoo, right? And then she had a baby. And it was like, oh, this is so much work. I want to be with my baby. This is a little troubling, yada, yada. Continues on, another baby, first child goes to school. Now she realizes, okay, I have the news anchor shift, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. My kid's at school during the day. I'm never seeing my child. This is now the troubles are really outweighing the treasures at this point, right? So the next thing is contributions. So I take a look at my satisfaction, my treasures and troubles, but then I also take a look at, well, how much have I contributed? We do this consciously, but we also do this unconsciously. Piles of research from so many fields. I mean, just piles and piles. I could just show you the piles, right? Say the more you invest in something, your time, your energy, your talent, your creativity, your love, your heart, even sharing who you are. As you go through that process, you become more and more committed, for good or for bad, right? So this is exactly what happened to Melinda. So she had gone to school for this job. She'd taken all the internships. She did the horrible 4 a.m. shifts to finally earn her way to get to this job. How could she just let it go? But she was really troubled, and she sat down with her husband finally, and he'd seen her for years. Okay, so if you're in this position, understand you're not alone. For years, she was caught in that space of, do I stay with this or not? And he's finally said to her, you know what? Why don't we just let it go? And she said that in that moment, it was like a whole new world opened up to her. You mean I can just let this go? I don't have to let my sunk costs influence the rest of my life? The last factor, and we put these all together, and I'll show you that in a second. So treasures and troubles, contributions. Now, choices are something that can take away from our commitment. We usually think of choices as a good thing, and often they are, right? But if you want commitment, choices are actually a bad thing for you, right? Because if you see a lot of other really attractive options, I always sort of picture the guy, because we all have a friend who's like this guy, right? And he thinks he can have any woman, right? He's like thinking, he's like Giselle is going to be, in his dating, unless you're Tom Brady guy, this is not going to happen for you. And yet, as he really believes that he has all these great choices, he's less committed to any woman he's actually dating. Does that make sense? Yeah? So with Melinda, she didn't think that she had other choices. She was like, I was specifically trained for this job. There's nothing else I can do. But when she decided to open her eyes and consider some things, she realized that the skills that she'd learned as a professional journalist were actually skills that could be applied to a lot of jobs. and she ended up in the PR field. She's currently she does a great job in communications and marketing at my university, and she's totally committed. I asked her, I said, what do you think, because she's, used to being on camera and all that. And I said, what do you think I should wear? And she said, blue and orange, because I'm at Boise State. So blue and orange, she's just so dedicated to her job now, and she gets to be totally dedicated to her family at the same time. She figured out a way, knowing that commitment would shape her life. How did she want to shape her commitments? Here's the whole equation put together. I call it the commitment equation. Didn't make this up myself other than the words. This is all in the literature for anyone to take a look at. Commitment, the level of our commitment is dictated by, to a large extent, how much we treasure something minus how troubling it is, plus what we've contributed, minus the other good choices that we see. We know that commitment is going to shape our lives in significant ways. So why don't we shape our commitment in significant ways and create a life we truly value?